Okay, today's topic is as advertised, stirring the pot of Machloikes. Is it a righteous act or is it a sin? Is it a mitzvah or an aveira? We know when somebody feels that they're fighting l'shem shamayim, there's no end that they won't go to. All bets are off. It actually happened once. There were a number of chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. Oh, how are you? Having a meeting in Vilna, Rameh M'panu, Falls, Moshe Meislish, others, and it got heated. The meeting was Parshas how to deal with some of the political winds that were going on then between the chassidim and the misnagdim. And the Moshe Meislish said a very sharp comment to the mayor of Falls. And the Alter Rebbe wrote to the Moshe Meislish that a Machloikes, which is l'shem shamayim, is the most fearful of all debates, of all Machlokes, because everything gets thrown to the wind. There's nothing you wouldn't do when you feel that you're fighting for God. Yeah. You know, when Saddam Hussein was being sentenced to death, he was busy screaming in the courtroom, Allah, etc., etc., etc. In other words, everything that he did was in the name of God, atrocities. But because he did in the name of God, he felt justified. Yeah. Anyhow, there's a word of the Shalah that the word Machloikes starts with the letter Mem. The letter Mem means there's almost complete peace. There's a little gap, a little break, a little bit of a shvira, a little bit of division. Then it comes to a ches, where that division becomes very wide, extremely wide. Then it comes to a lamed, where each lamed reaches up, that each of the sides reach out to the leaders of the community to get them involved in their side. Then it goes to a kuf, which leaks down. Each of the sides involved in the argument, they reach out to the people they would never usually talk to, be caught talking to. But for the sake of rallying them to their side of the Machlokes, they reach down to the ordinary folk they would usually have nothing to do with. And then a sof, it ends with a sof is like a ches, but it's oozing out on the left side. It means it's not even contained anymore. The Machlokes is just oozing out. On the other hand, there's an old joke that discord may not be too bad. Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. Talmidei Chachamim add peace to the world. How so? People have always asked, how do you ever see that a Talmid Chacham, a rabbi, adds peace to the world? It's very simple. Before the rabbi came, there were two balabatim that would never speak to each other. Once the rabbi came, they all gang up against the Rav. So the rabbi makes peace between the whole community, a common enemy. So Machlokes can actually create unity as well. Parshas Korach. This is if there's ever a time to speak about Machlokes and Achdus, this is the Parsha. Join me in number one. In number one, this is a Yalkut Shimoni in this week's Parsha. It's a whopper. To get a picture of what Korach, the winds Korach was blowing, the waves he was creating. Rashi brings from the Medrash that Korach enticed the entire nation. Ad shenispatu kulam. There was a night between from when the instigation began until the next day when they brought the Keteris, etc. And then the ground opened up and the fire and the... That night Korach made his rounds and he convinced the entire nation. Ad shenispatu kulam, they were all convinced. How so? How'd that happen? Look at number one. Uvamoishav leitzim lo yashav. The pasuk says in Tillim that a righteous person does not sit amongst the scoffers. Zeh Korach. Korach he is the paradigm of a scoffer. Shahaya misloitzit, he would scoff on Moshe v'Aaron. Me also, what did he do? Kinas aleim kol hakol, he gathered the entire people. Shenemar vayakal aleim Korach es kol ha'edah. The pasuk says that when the showdown finally arrived, Korach had gathered the entire nation. And Rashi said they were on his side. They were seduced to join him. Hischil loymar lifneim diva litzanos. He began to say litzanos, scoffing, to the entire populace. And he told them a story. Listen to Korach's story. A heart-wrenching story. Armaleni said, Almana achas hoysa b'shchonoi said there was a widow. V'ima shtei no'oris yisoimus. And she had 2 little girls, right? She has no husband, her girls have no father.
In the midbar.
Yeah.
In the midbar.
Yeah, in the midbar. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is a story. She had a field. The truth is, it could be he was telling them a mashal, something that would happen when they go to Eretz Yisrael. But listen to the story. Boss Lachrosh, she wanted to plow the field. She has nothing. She has little kids. She has no husband to bring in parnasa. She wants to plow the field. Moshe says, no. She was going to plow with 2 different animals. Moshe said, no, you can't plow with an ox and a donkey. Boss Lizroy, she wanted to plant. She was going to mix some seeds together. Moshe said, no, you can't plant that. Boss licked her when it came time to harvest. Velasus Arema, and to create a bundle of sheaves. Moshe said, no, you can't take all of that. You have to leave the gifts for the poor, the corner of the field, and the stuff you forgot, and the leket, etc. So what does she have? She has very little with her. Boss lasses goyim, so she wants to make a pile of the few grains she does have. Amallah, Moshe said, no, to need truma, you got to give truma. You got to give meiser rishon to the Levi, meiser sheni to take to Yerushalayim. His stikol din, no, she was a good woman. She justifies the din. V'nosnaloi, she gives it all. She gives it. So what does Moshe do now? Or what does she do? Amda, she got up. Umachris, she sold the field. V'lakcha shtei kvasa, she bought 2 lambs. K'dei lulbash gizoseyan, in order that the shearings could provide clothing for her and her kids. V'leyahanis mit peiroseyan, and to enjoy the peiros, the stuff they can get from them. Kivan sheyoldu, once they had kids, the 2 lambs gave birth, and this woman was very excited. Now the family has grown. No, Aaron came and said, give me the firstborn. Tnei li sabecheres. Kachom Hashem told me, call abachar sheyvavagam. She justifies the din, and she gives Aaron the vlad. She gives him the baby. Then the time comes to finally exist, to finally shear. She's excited. No, because she shears it. So Aaron says, no, it's nearly racist. I gave. Give me the shearings. Because God said, V'reishis gave sencha. So Amar, she said, Ein bi koich la'amud bi. Says, I can't handle this man. Hareini shoichtan, I'm going to shech them and eat them. So she shechs them. So Aaron and Moshe say, no, you got to give me hazraya, you got to give me the forearm, the l'chai, and the cheekbones, the keva, and the gut. So Amr, she said, even after I shechted them, loy nitzalti miyadi, I'm not saved from this guy. She said, harei heina lai chayrim. So she said, you know what, they're all chayrim, they're all consecrated. He said, great, kula shuli, I get the whole thing now. Belongs to the Kehunah. Shekacham HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all chayrim b'Yisrael. Notal Aaron took it, v'halach and he went, v'nicha boichen, and she left the woman crying, he and her 2 girls. That's the story.
This is where the communists learned the system.
No, this is what politicians do. They twist the people's words to make it sound...
Exactly. This was Korach's it's a great story.
It's a story, though, wasn't it?
Right, yeah. It hadn't happened. But he's telling them what's going to happen. The moment we go into Eretz Yisrael. There's a big debate if Korach was after the Meraglim or before the Meraglim. Machloikes in the Medrashim. What?
More against the Torah. I mean,
Well, he felt, Korach definitely felt that Moshe made up some stuff. The simple understanding is that Tchelis, Korach laughed about Tchelis, Korach laughed about the mezuzah. It sounds like he didn't believe. Or he felt that Moshe was maybe each of the mitzvahs the Eibusha did tell Moshe, but Moshe mispresented, misunderstood, added details. Exactly. There's an Indian of mezuzah, but you have to, not if the house was full of svarim and things like that. So there's a lot of discussion what exactly Korach's. Korach was a very clever man. In fact, according to one opinion in Gemara, you see the 250 people that Korach brought, that they all brought Keteris, they all died by fire. Dasan, Aviram, and others fell into the ground. What happened to Korach? One opinion is Korach suffered neither death. He died in the plague that happened, because he actually was different than Dasan, Aviram, and the 250. He actually meant it for real. He was the most sincere. Another opinion says Fakert, he was burnt and he was swallowed by the ground. He was the least sincere. So there's a lot of discussion, but we'll have to leave that for now. But you read this story and you say, Korach was a good speaker. He really painted a good story. And he ends off saying, Aaron goes off with the animal, and Nebuch, this woman's crying, the kids are crying. Now you get a bit of an inkling of how Korach was able to amass the masses. If you jump into number 3 for a second underneath, this is from the Rameh M'panu. He says, Korach and his wife were major scoffers. His wife was a big part of it. In fact, when not too long before this, all the Leviim had to go through a process where they were shaven, and they were dunked in the mikveh, and they were waved. Yaakov and Aaron HaKohen picked them up and waved them. They went through a whole process, and Korach comes home, and his wife says, "What happened to you?" He tells her it happened to all the Leviim. Moshe did it to himself as well. She said, Moshe wanted to see you ridiculed. He was even willing to go through it himself. Abi could see you. And she really riled him on. So the Rameh M'panu, Menachem M'panu writes that Korach and his wife came back a few times. And each time they ended up in some circumstances of comedy. How so? He quotes 2 stories. I don't have them, will be too much. One story is from the Dorim, one story is in Medrash. The story in the Dorim, very quickly, is there was a husband and a wife who didn't fully understand each other. One was from Eretz Yisrael, one was from Bava. He tells her, make me a few beans for supper. She makes him 2 beans for supper. We did one. He said, I need a lot more than that. The next day, there was pots and pots of beans. Yeah, he's getting nervous from her. He tells her, he used the word that he wanted 2 watermelons. But the same word, butzina, can mean candles. She brings him 2 candles. He says, break them on the Bava, on the gate, on the head of the gate. Which meant that the lintel by the entrance of the house, smash the candles there. The word Bava can mean gate. The word Bava was also the name of a great scholar, Bava ben Buta. She thought her husband meant to smash the candles on the head of Bava ben Buta. The story in Gemara, she went, and Bava was in the middle of Shir. She comes in, smashes the candles on his head. He looks up and says, what is this about? She says, my husband told me to do this. She said, oh, if you listen to your husband, I saw he gave her a big bracha. He gave her a beautiful bracha. That's one story. There's another story in Medrash that Rameh M'panu, our good friend Rameh M'panu that we spoke about a few nights ago, Rameh M'panu was giving shir Friday night. And there were men there were women there. Right, exactly. There was a woman that was by the shir. Her husband's at home. He's waiting to make kiddush, the table's set. You know, he has his herring over there, he has everything he wants to eat. He's holding the She's not coming home. He's waiting. She comes home very late because the shir went late. He was furious. He says, where were you? She says, I was at a shir. Usually the other way around, the husband. I was at a shir. He says, I command you to leave this house, go to Rameh M'panu and spit in his face. And she left the house bewildered, how she's going to spit in Rameh M'panu's face. But her friends heard about her predicament. Rabbi Meir heard about it too, either through HaKodesh or he actually heard the story. And Rabbi Meir announced at one of the shiurim that I have some issue with my eyes. I need someone to spit in my eyes, someone to give a lachash incantation. And the woman's friends tell her, no, now's your chance. She walks up to Rabbi Meir, she says, I don't know how to do this. He says, it's very simple, just spit. And not once, not twice, 7 times. And she spits and she says, oh wow. He says, tell your husband, you told me to spit 1 time. I went and I spat 7 times. And Rabbi Meir's students asked him, Mazeh, what's this about? He said, listen, if the Eibush is happy for his name to be erased by the Soita case, to make peace between a husband and a wife, this is the least I could do. So you won't believe it. Comes Reb Menachem Azariah of Pano, 450 years ago, in the gilgulim neshamas. He says these two stories, it's the same husband and the same wife, and you know who they are? The husband is Korach, and the wife is Korach's wife. And he says, could join the second last line of number 3. The man and the woman, both of these stories, is Korach and his wife. Late sonim hayu, they were scoffers while they were alive. Vayolaitzim al divrei Moshe va'Aaron. They scoffed at Moshe. Everything was a joke, right? You see how she irked him on. He got everybody else on. The V'chein ovdeim hashta b'chem. And so, to the next time they come back, you have these two episodes. You have these two comedic episodes. That's the same characters. So they were scoffers not just once. It's mamash deeply rooted into their identities. Okay, but this is where everything begins. Look at number 2. It's a Gemara in Sanhedrin towards the end. It says the following. Number 2. Vayakom Moshe vayelech al Dasan va'aviram. After the Eibishter told Moshe that have the Yidden remove themselves from the area of Korach, of Dasan va'aviram, Moshe actually went to Dasan va'aviram, seemingly despite the Eibishter's instructions. The Medrash Tanchuma points out, Hashem told Moshe, that's it, I'm done with these people, tell the people to remove themselves. Moshe actually, before he did that, before he fulfilled God's instruction, Moshe tried one last time to see if he could make peace. He went to Dasan and Aviram. Amar Reish Lakish said Reish Lakish, Mikan, from here you see, she'ein machzikin b'Machloikes. You can't perpetuate a Machlokes. You have to try and stop a Machlokes. Now he doesn't say ein maschilin, don't begin. He says forget about that. Even if somehow you're embroiled in a Machlokes, you didn't start it, you're the one that's right, you did nothing wrong, you have an obligation to try and end it. That's what happened with Moshe here. Moshe was the aggrieved party. Moshe didn't begin this discussion at all. And nonetheless, you see from Moshe's actions that had Moshe not done this, he would be accused of being machzik, of holding on to a Machlokes. The Amar Rav, how does Reish Lakish know this? Because of a statement of Rav. Rav says, Kol ha-machzik b'Machlokes over belav. If you perpetuate a Machlokes, you violate a loisasa. Shenemar, it says in this week's parsha, after those had died, the 250 people had been consumed by the fire, the Eibishter instructs that all of their pans that they use for the Ketores should be flattened out and used to bedek and coat the outer Mizbech, the Mizbech of copper. And the Pasuk says, in order, this should be a reminder for all future generations. When they see the Mizbeach, they're going to say, ha ha ha, you see what this copper is? These are those that fought against the Kehunah, and look what happened to them. And the Pasuk says, V'lo yeh keKorach v'adasai. There won't be like Korach and his Ada anymore. So the Pasuk the Rav seems to be saying, if somebody is involved in a Machlokes, he violates the loisase of not continuing to be like Korach. Now that's interesting because that's what Rav says. Rav is talking about Korach. Reish Lakish extrapolates and wants to apply it to Moshe. That when Moshe went to Dasan v'Aviram, he was making sure not to be in this category of machzik b'Machlokes. Wait a second. Rav, who's the source of this idea, was talking about Korach. He was the instigator. He began the Machlokes. Reish Lakish wants to extrapolate that even if you're the aggrieved party, you're the victim, and you have a chance to end the Machlokes, you have an obligation to do so. Like, how does Reish Lakish see that from Rav? It's like mamash extrapolating to a whole new arena. Rav Ashi finishes off. Roi litstara. If someone is involved in Machlokes, he should get saras. Because Ksiv Hach, it says in this week's parsha, the pasuk ends off, there should never be like Korach and his Ada again. Biyad Moshe, like Hashem told, in the hand of Moshe. That's how the pasuk ends. What does it mean biyad Moshe? Strange term. Uksiv Hasem, it says there, Vayomer Hashem loy oid haveino yodcha bechikecha. In Parshas Shmos, Moshe is by the burning bush. He tells the Eibishter, you're going to send me to Egypt. How will the Jews what will cause them to believe in me? So the Eibishter gave him, one of the signs was, put your hand in your chek, take it out, it'll be full of tzaras, you put it back, you do that magic trick, you will chap them. It says the hand of Moshe over there refers to tzaras, so to an R parsha. When the pasuk says it'll never be like Korach and his Eidah, as Hashem told Biyad Moshe in the hand of Moshe, is hinting to the fact if anyone's involved in Machloikes, he'll get tzaras. That is what the Gemara says. So, really, Rav says one of the 365 lois sasers is not to be embroidered in a Machloikes. Does he mean it for real? It's one of the 613 mitzvahs. One of the 365 lois sasers is not to be involved in a Machloikes. Does he mean it for real? So look at number 5. Number 5 is the Sefer, the She'iltus. The She'iltus, which means the questions, was written in the early 700s. It's pretty much the first Sefer that we have after the Gemara was sealed. It was written by a fellow, Rabbi Choi Goin, and he lives in Bava, in Pumbedisa. He spent most of his life in Bava. Unfortunately, due to political reasons, he left. He was when the Goin, what?
Machloikes.
Yeah, Machloikes. Well, I'll tell you what happened. When there was the accepted Goin before him, passed away, he was in line to the throne, but the Jewish president, the Reish Galusa, the head of the exile, took Rabbi Acha's attendant, his shamash, his attendant, the deputy rabbi, the assistant rabbi, the assistant rabbi we'll call him, the assistant rabbi, and made him the goin. And it was such an offense to Rabbi Acha, he left, he went to Eretz Yisrael. He finished his life in Eretz Yisrael. And he wrote a sefer called the She'iltus, which goes through all the parshas, and discussing, in basically each parsha, discussing some halachic inquiries related to the parsha. It's in pretty much Aramaic, and it's interesting. The Meiri writes 800 years ago, the reason why Rabbi Acha wrote this was he had a son, and his son was not disposed to learning, wasn't really interested in learning. So the Gemara wasn't doing it for him. So his father wrote a sefer touching certain mitzvahs relating to each Shabbos, Parshas of the week. So, every week you learn this, next week you learn a bit of that. It's a little more of an interesting layout. Every Parsha, halacha connected to the Parsha, which today is very popular. He's the first guy that did it. Halacha related to the Parsha. It's similar to the Sefer HaChinuch. We have a tradition. The Sefer HaChinuch himself, 800 years ago, also wrote his Sefer. He goes through all the mitzvahs related to that Parsha, and he discusses the philosophy behind it. The reason he wrote it, he writes himself, he wrote it because he also had a kid, and he wanted to be moishech the kid's heart. So he wanted that every Shabbos he'll learn about the mitzvahs of that week and learn the reasons behind it, the philosophy, a bit of machshava. So back in the day when they wanted to rope a kid in, they taught him halacha related to the parsha.
Still.
Well, that's what we're doing over here by our shiurim as well. So it's been working since
800.
Since 700, right from the She'ilta. So in number 5, the She'iltus Rabbi Choi Goin says the following. She'ilta number 5. The asir lohoin l'debeis Yisrael l'mevet plukta. It's asir for a Jew to, now l'mevet means to make. It sounds like to begin a Machloikes. The kivan to kaimi beplukta. Now he gives a fascinating reason. He says, you know why? Kivan to kaimi beplukta. If you're involved in a Machloikes, asur l'misna adod, you're going to hate each other. Va'amar Achmana, it says in Parshas Kedoshim, lo sisnes achicha b'mavecha, you can't hate your brother in your heart. V'loi mi boy, forget about the zuter boy l'meikif l'rabba, that the small guy needs to concede to the greater one. Ela rather, it's the other way around too. Afilu rabba, even the greater one, mi boy le, he's required l'meikif to concede and bend his head l'zuter to the smaller one. The loy teve plukta to avoid an argument. And then he quotes the Gemara we saw in number 2. He learned from the fact that Moshe went to Dasan Va'aviram that the obligation to stop a Machloikes is not necessarily on the more ordinary individual. No. If the scholar, the rabbi, the leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, sees that the other party is not putting an end to it, he has an obligation to do it himself. So the She'ilta says it's Asur. But the She'ilta says a fascinating thing. You know why you can't have a Machloikes? You're going to come to hate your brother in your heart. Now here's interesting. That prohibition of not hating your brother in the heart is one of the 613. But you only violate it if you hate your brother in your heart. If you tell your brother that you hate him, you don't violate that Issur. It makes sense. Often there's a feud just because of a misunderstanding. And for decades and decades, people harbor resentment for something which was, if the other party would just know what happened, it could easily explain, and it would be resolved, there would be peace and harmony. So the Torah says, don't hate your brother in your heart. You have a problem, tell him. Then maybe you could resolve it. So you might think if you hate someone, you only violate if you have it in your heart. But if you scream at the guy, then you're better off. Not so fast. If you vocalize and verbalize your hate for another person, you do violate other prohibitions. Not this one. You violate v'ahavta l'recha kamecha. You violate lo sikaim v'lo sitr. Don't take vengeance. Lo sitr means not to harbor animosity and to verbalize it. So either way you get pinned. But so you wonder why the She'iltus chooses the one of not hating your brother in your heart. He's talking about people that are involved in a Machloikes. They're being very verbal. If they hate the other guy, they're going to let him know. So they're not going to violate this law. They're going to violate the other law. So why he chooses this, I don't know. Apparently he's talking about when there's a real civilized Machloikes and we're not throwing derogatory statements at each other. That stuff remains in the heart. He's talking about a Machloikes of people who are somewhat civilized, and the real the shmutz stays inside. You're going to be over lo sisnas achicha b'levech in your heart. But it's a fascinating thing. So what's the She'ilta saying? That the Eibush said you can't have a Machloikes because you may come to hate each other? Do we b'chlal ever have that in Torah? That you can't, that the Torah will prohibit one thing so you shouldn't come to something else? Do we ever have that one mitzvah is a safeguard for another? You know, a Nazir is not allowed to drink wine, so you also can't have grapes. And many Rishonim say grapes is really a non-issue for a Nazir. It's a safeguard. Don't eat grapes, because then you'll have them once they have alcohol already. Okay, but that's all part, that could be a part of one loisas. But to have two different prohibitions, and one is there just as a safeguard for another. Usually rabbinic enactments are there as a safeguard. Do you ever have that biblically you could have one mitzvah as a safeguard for something else? The Rambam says a person can't be intimate with a woman that carries chorus or carries malchus. There are many, many women. All the isurei bi, you can't be intimate with them. But what about preliminary stages? Touching, hugging, kissing, these types of things. So the Rambam holds if intimacy carries chorus, then the preliminary stages all carry malchus. If the intimacy itself only malchus, then the preliminary stage would be rabbinic. But if the intimacy has chorus, then anything before, if it's for the sake of pleasure, carries malchus. Minat Torah, it's also Minat Torah. The Ramban disagrees. The Ramban says no. Preliminary acts are only rabbinic, even if the intimacy is chorus. The Ramban disagrees. And part of the Ramban's issue, the way it's explained, is you can't have one loisas that completes the safeguard for something else. So others explain, the Rambam holds it's not a safeguard. There's an Indian for itself not to have chibuk and nishuk with a woman who's prohibited to. It's not a safeguard. Anyhow, it's a very interesting Indian for its own right. Rabbi Yosef Engel, the great Torah genius, passed away just over 100 years ago. He has a long piece going through many sources throughout Shas. Do you find that one biblical idea could be prohibited just to safeguard something else? So if you look at number 7, sorry we're jumping, but look at number 7. This is from Rabbi Yosef Engel, his notes on Gemara. On the Gemara in Sanhedrin that we saw, look at number 7. Over Balav Shnemayeh, Nichtav B'tzidai. It was written on the side of his Gemara. In the She'iltus Parshas Korach, She'iltu the Asir Lahu. It's also for you, Beis Yisrael, to be involved in a Machloikes, because once they're involved in a Machloikes, they're going to come to hate each other. Hashem says you can't hate. Go down another line where he says Ad Kan L'Shem. We're number 7, 4 lines from the bottom. Nira, there's a nun there. Number 7, 4 lines from the bottom. Nira, it seems to me. The Svira Leila Shiltus, the Shiltus believes, the High Over Balav Shenem Marchulu. When the Gemara says if you're involved in a Machloikes, you violate a lav, Asmachtahi. It's only an Asmachta. It's only rabbinic. Asmachta means it's only rabbinic, and the Chachamim found the pasuk to link it to just to strengthen their source. But it's not the real meaning of the pasuk. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, he feels like according to the She'iltus, it's not awesome in Atur to be involved in a Machlokes, only rabbinic. The pasuk, the Chachamim just they latched onto the pasuk. It's Asmachta. Or maybe Shiltus time of Dekra Kadosh. Maybe the She'iltus is being doirish time of Dekra. What that means, that's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon throughout, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, feels you have the right to look at a pasuk, a mitzvah, smell out the reason behind the mitzvah, and therefore know when the mitzvah does and doesn't apply. The other rabbis say you don't have the authority to be doirish time into it, to seek out the reason for the pasuk. God gave a mitzvah, finished. In fact, you don't have the right to start saying, you know why God said it, and therefore decide where and when it should apply. But if Shimon says you can. So Rabbi Yosef Engel says maybe the She'iltus is just he's following the path of Rabbi Shimon. Maybe the She'iltus holds it is biblical not to be involved in a Machloikes. And he's giving you the reason why. You shouldn't come to hate the guy. The Isra Machloikes is Mishum Siyog, it's because of offense. You shouldn't come to hate. Ukvar herachti belekach tov. I already wrote at length in my sefer lekach tov. The shayich siyog b'doraisa. You can have, according to Rabbi Yosef Engel, you can have biblically that one mitzvah is there to be a safeguard for another. So he's unsure. The Rabbi Yosef Engel is unsure how to learn the shiltus. Does the shiltus hold it's literal that you violate a loisas in the Torah, and he's just giving the reason why the Eibishter forbade it? Or no, the shiltus is saying it's just rabbinic. The Chachamim made as a safeguard, you shouldn't hate your friend. And the Chachamim latched it onto the pasuk of Li Aloye Kairach. So Yosef Engel is unsure. Fine. It happens to be shortly after the She'iltus, there was another sefer, very important sefer came out, called the Halachas Gedolos, the big Halachas. Who wrote it? Major debate. The Rishonim 800 years ago. Debate if it was written by a guy called Reb Shimon Kaira. The Rambam believes that, the Ramban, but the Baalei HaTosfos believe it was written by a guy, Reb Yehudoi Goin. Okay? We know both of these people existed, and both of them wrote works on halacha. The question is what we have today called the Halachas Gedolos is printed. The Halachas Gedolos, who wrote it? Is it from the pen of Reb Shimon Kaira or Reb Yehudoi Goin? But either way, it's going back 1,200 years or so. And the Halachas Gedolos is called the Bahag in short, the Baal Halachas Gedolos. He writes clearly that he believes it's one of the 613. You can't be involved in a Machlokes. Now that's what Rav says. Reish Lakish, and Rav was talking about you shouldn't be like Korach. Reish Lakish extrapolates you can't even, that had Moshe not seized the opportunity to make peace with Dasan V'Aviram, he would have been categorized as Machzik b'Machlokes, which is a whopper. Like I said, Korach starts the rebellion, he's wrong, he's everything. Moshe's the victim, he did nothing. If he doesn't seize the opportunity to cease the Machlokes, you're going to hold him, you're going to label him a Machzik b'Machlokes? It's pretty harsh. So look at number 4. Number 4 is a comment of Reb Reuven Margolis. Reb Reuven Margolis was an incredible Talmid Chacham, passed away in the 60s. He was a librarian in Tel Aviv. The Rebbe has letters to him. He was an unbelievable expert in every sefer he had in the library. And he wrote a sefer on Masechta Sanhedrin called Margolis Hayam, Pearls of the Sea. And in number 4 he writes, on the Gemara that says, Amar Rav, Kol HaMachzik B'Machloikes Oiva B'Lav. Shenemar, there shouldn't be like Korach and his Eidah. B'Chamra V'Chia, he's quoting a sefer Chamra V'Chia. Who wrote Chamra V'Chia? Reb Chaim ben Venesti. Reb Chaim ben Venesti was rabbi of Izmir. In Turkey, we have a representative from Turkey, a landsman. Going back a little while, though, to the 1600s, he was in the thick of things during the Shabsai Tzvi debacle. We've spoken about in the past. He was originally against, then he became a supporter, and Reb Shabsai actually instated him to be the chief rabbi of that whole area. Then when Reb Shabsai converted to Islam, obviously, Reb Chaim withdrew his support. Although many did continue to support Shabsai Tzvi. Reb Chaim ben Venesti, he's known as the Knesses Hagdola. It's a very important work he wrote on halacha, incredible. But he wrote a work on Masechta Sanhedrin called Chamra V'Chia. Quotes Reb Reuven Margolis, B'Chamra V'Chia, Hevi he brings, Kol HaMachzik B'Machloikes, anyone that holds on to Machlokes, Afal Pisha Din Ima, even if he's right. Even the party that's right. Oiver B'Lav violates a lav. You violate a lav, it sounds like biblical. Why? Now Rav, the Rav statement's not a raya. Rav said you can't be like Korach. Korach was wrong. But Reish Lakish's statement, who learns from what Moshe did, that Moshe went to Dasan Vaviram, and Reish Lakish uses the same words as Rav, that Moshe would have been a machzik b'machloikes. So it says the Chamra V'Chia, Doksiv, it says Vayakom Moshe arose, Vayelech, he went to Dasan Vaviram, V'loi rotza lahachzik, he didn't want to hold on to the machlokes. V'halach likrosim, why did Moshe go to them? Moshe went, like the Medrash Tanchuma points out, even after Hashem told Moshe, I'm done, tell the Yidden to stand away from the Dasan Vaviram, etc. Moshe tried one lesson. Kedei sheyachzru b'hem, in order they should do tshuva. She'im lo halach, had Moshe not gone, Moshe would have violated machzik b'machloikes. Even though the prohibition wasn't given yet, the prohibition was given at the end of the story. But the idea that situation Moshe was in, Moshe would have violated. It's a whopping statement. See, I would have said even if Rav means you violate one of the 613 if you like Korach, but I would have assumed Reish Lakish is extrapolating that Derabanan or Midas Chassidus what Moshe did. According to Chamra V'Chia, Moshe is categorized as the exact same machzik Machlokes, and he would have violated on a lav. It's a whopper. The truth is, he's not the first one who says this. Rabbi Yonasan of Lunel was part of a group of rabbis called the Chachmei Lunel, the wise men of Lunel. Lunel is in Provence. So in the times of the Rambam, there was a group of Chachamim in Lunel who very much supported the Rambam. Rabbi Yonasan was amongst them. He wrote a commentary on the Rif. I couldn't get it on the paper, but Rabbi Yonasan already, 800 years ago, he writes the same thing. So according to this, it's a whopper. According to Rabbi Yonasan and the Knesset HaGedolah, it's very hard to wrap your head around that. If someone starts a Machloikes against you, you're the leader, you haven't done anything, you never did anything wrong to that person, you did not wrong that person ever, you're right in this debate, yet the moment you have an opportunity to end the Machlokes and you don't, you're considered just like the instigator. It's a whopper. What?
Shouldn't have, with that scenario, shouldn't Moshe have reached out to Korach as well?
So
Time?
The truth is, he reached out to Dasan Vaviram a few times. This was at the last moment. Before then, he tried. He discussed with Korach.
Was first, but then
He reached out to Dasan a few times. So to Korach. The day before, the whole thing happened over 2 days, on day 1 and day 2. And the part of the reason this is so perplexing is because of number 6. Number 6 is from the Geriz. His name was Rabbi Yitzchak Zev, the Brisker Rav he was called, the son of Reb Chaim Brisker, the famous Reb Chaim Soloveitchik of Brisk. had a son called Yitzchak Zev Velvel. Zev, he was called Velvel, Itcha Velvel, and the Brisker Rav was known. He was a Misnagid. He was more of a Misnagid than his father, Reb Chaim. In fact, the Brisker Rav once said about himself, he said, "My Zayde, the Beis Halevi, Reb Chaim Brisker's father, he appreciated Chassidus, not Chassidim. My father, Reb Chaim, appreciated Chassidim, not Chassidus. Me, I don't appreciate either." But the truth is that by the Holocaust, what? I'll tell you after there's a number of things he said. He got a copy of the Rebbe's first Maimer, Bossi Lagani. And I'll tell you later what he commented about that. But the Frierdiker Rebbe actually made sure at some point that the Brisker Rav should get a Muhudu Dike Esrog Sukkos. The Frierdiker Rebbe himself made sure that the Rav should get a Muhudu Dike Esrog for Sukkos. He was a big guy. So the Griz, he says the following on Korach. Look at number 6. He says, Vayishlach Moshe, when Moshe first reached out to Dasan Vaviram on day 1, the story we were reading until now happened on day 2, right before they were swallowed up. But on day 1, Moshe calls to them, Vayomer, when they said, Loi Na'ale, right? They said, we're not going, we're number 6, first line. They said, we're not going to come. And then they said, oh, you took us out of Egypt and you dumped us in the desert. Kisistarel, and now you want to be king. Even if you pluck out our eyes, Loi Na'ale, we won't come to you. So he says, why did they say twice Loi Na'ale? They said twice, we won't come up. So Yesh Loimer, number 6, the second line, the end. Dihine, Moshe was a Nasi, Moshe was a leader, he was the head of the Sanhedrin, he was also a king. Like the Rambam writes in Hilchos Beis HaBechira, that Moshe Rabbeinu Melech Haya. Moshe was both a king, a Nasi is a spiritual leader, Nasi is the head of the Sanhedrin. Moshe filled both roles. She says like this, Veheim Dasan Vaviram Mishnei Dinim Hayu Chayavim B'chvoidei. For 2 reasons, they were chayiv to listen to Moshe. Moshe is the head of the Sanhedrin, plus is the king. B'chol zos nonetheless sarvu, they refused. L'chatchila, when they said, Loi Na'ale, we won't go up, we won't listen to you, even though you're the Nasi. The second time, they were speaking as Moshe is a king. And they said, Loi Na'ale, af midin melech sarvu l'shmoeloi. He says, that's why the second time they said that, it says, Vayichal Moshe, when Moshe became very angry. You know why Moshe became angry? Because a melech can't forego on his covet. We discussed this on Thursday. A Nasi can. So as Nasi, they said, you're the head of Sanhedrin, who cares? He can say, all right, I don't like what you said, but I won't hold it against you. The second time, they were confronting and ignoring, rebelling against his position as melech. That he has no right to forgo. Melech can't be moichel on his covet. That's why Moshe became angry. The truth is, Rashi quotes from the Medrash, when it says Moshe became angry, Moshe was very pained. Nitztar, Moshe was very pained. Moshe was very pained at what happened with Dasan Vaviram, because they were very great people. Dasan Vaviram, we once had a shir a couple of years ago, Dasan Vaviram were extremely great people. In fact, in last week's Parsha in Shlach, when the Yidden got together and said, well, we're stuck in the desert for 40 years, out with Moshe and Aaron, we need new leaders. You know what they said? In place of Moshe, we'll have Dasan. In place of Aaron, we'll have Aviram. It's a clear Yalkut Shimoni. They were contenders, literally. They were literally contenders to fulfill those roles of Moshe and Aaron. Unbelievable. So Moshe was very pained when he knew that they were going to have a sour end. But, you read this Brisker Rav and you wonder, Moshe's the Nasi. It's not just Moshe was right and Moshe was the victim over here. He's the Melech. He's the Nasi. And yet, Rabbi Yonason of Lanil and the Knesset Agdola hold, Moshe would have violated a loisasa of holding on to. It's a whopper. Very hard to get your head around that.
Say the same thing about the Rebbe. Any comments that he made about the Rebbe? Nasi Melech.
Yeah.
As a king, he had to.
Right, he had to. So, but you wonder, okay, there's a cute vort of the Briskerah, but the fact is, after this, Moshe did try and make peace with Dosan Vaviram. He did try and make peace with them. There are those that believe that Moshe was a different type of king. I think we once had a shir on it. Moshe was a type of king that could be Meichel on his honor. Because we have a story that by the big feast, when Yisro came, Moshe was the one who was walking around attending. How could Moshe as a king do that? So some believe Moshe wasn't a melech at all, he was just a nasi. Others believe Moshe's malchus was different than everybody else. And his type of king, he could have been Meichel. But okay. So let's move. Join me though in number 8.
I was wedding the Peter Greva.
Right.
Also.
Yeah. That's right. The Belzer Rebbe once said the reason why Moshe was the waiter by that meal with Yisro is because that meal happened on Yom Kippur when Moshe came down with the second luchos. That was the first time it could have happened because until then Moshe was busy on the mountain. When Moshe came down, he was able to finally have a meal. He was the only one fasting because he started fasting on the mountain. He can't come down and tell the Yidden that at 12 o'clock midday, you have to fast the next 6 hours. Yom Kippur is either all or nothing. You can't. So he was the only one fasting. So to cover up, why isn't he eating? He waited. He walked around and waited. Join me number 8. The Rambam's opinion. The Rambam believes, this is the Rambam in his Sefer HaMitzvos in the Shoroshim, in root number 8. A well-known debate of the Rambam and the Ramban. What's taka the deal with being machzik b'Machloikes? What do you violate for holding on to a Machlokes? Says the Rambam. The Rambam said, I'll first tell you outside, just when the Rambam says, when the pasuk says in this week's parsha, there should never be like Korach and his congregation, it's not a loy sasa telling what you should or shouldn't do. You know how you read the pasuk? You read it like this. The pasuk says, you should take the leftover pans of all the 250 men that offered the Ketores, flatten them out, coat them, use them as coating on the Mizbech. In order, this should be a reminder for all future generations not to argue on the Kehunah, and there won't be like Korach and his congregation. You know how the Rambam understands that to mean? That if anybody ever argues on the Kehunah in the future, they won't end up like Korach and his congregation. They're not going to get swallowed up in the ground. Rather, they're going to get saras. Like the pasuk says, they'll get what happened to Moshe's hand. The pasuk is saying that if there ever is a Machloikes against the Kohanim in the future, it's not what will happen will not be what happened to Korach and his congregation. Rather, it's going to be saras. It happened by a Jewish king called Uziah. Uziah the king decided one day he wants to be a Kohen. He wanted to enter the Heichel to offer the Ketores. The Kohanim tried to stop him and he refused, and boom, he got saras on his forehead. So the Rambam writes in number 8, V'chein Amrei, it says, that there won't be hushlila. It's not telling you what you can't do, it's telling you that it won't end up being. The Chachamim Amavar, Shu Shlila, it's telling you what won't be. Pirshu in Yonah, and the Chacham explained what it means, V'amru. Shehu Yis'ala, that God, Sipulon is telling us, that anyone who argues on the Kehunah, the urban will argue against it, Lo Yachul Boi Mashigi B'Kerach. What happened to Korach won't happen to him. You won't get swallowed, you won't get burnt. Omnam, yet what will be the punishment? Like Hashem spoke, B'yad Moshe, return to learn with saras. Like Hashem told him, Parshas Shmos, put your hand in B'cheikecha. Ve'eviu raya, and the Chacham bring a proof. What happened? Mashakar b'Uziah melech Yehuda. Where's the Rambam quoting this from? It's a Medrash Tanchuma Parshas Tzav. It's a very strange way of reading the pasuk. The Tanchuma learns the pasuk is saying, when the Jews will see the pans, the smashed pans, in order should be a reminder never to fight against the Kehunah. But if they do, it won't be like what happened to Korach. That's never going to happen again. Something else will happen. Saras. That's how the Rambam learns the pasuk. Va'afapi continues the Rambam, even though we find Lashon Acher b'Gemara Sanhedrin. We're a bunch of scholars. We know the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Vu Amram Zal is what they say. Whoever's machzik b'Machloikes violates a loy sase. Shnei maloike Korach. Ze al sadas machte. Says the Rambam, nah, the pasuk doesn't mean that. The Chacham said don't fight. They linked it. Not that the pasuk means that. You know what the pshat of the pasuk is? It's like the Medrash in Tanchuma. If people do fight in the future, it won't reoccur. The miracles that happened to Korach and his Eidah, rather, the instigators will be punished with saras. That's what the Rambam says. Comes the Ramban on his critique on the Rambam Seif Mitzvahs. What? You think that's the pshat of the pasuk? That Medrash in Tanchuma, if anything, that's pshat of the pasuk? Do you know how Rashi learns pshat of the pasuk? Rashi learns pshat of the pasuk different. Not like the Medrash in Tanchuma, not like the Gemara in San. Rashi says very simple. The pshat of the pasuk is very simple. If you walk into the Beis HaMikdash and you're going to see those flattened pans surrounding the Mizbeach, you will remember what happened to those that fought about the Kehunah. And you know what's going to happen? You're not going to fight. There'll never be another instigator like Korach. It's not a loisase. The Torah is saying through this we're going to make sure there'll never be. Through causing fear. It's going to be a frightful reminder. We will ensure v'lo yeh k'korach. That's how Rashi learns. In fact, the Rambam writes this actually in another place in his Sefer HaMitzvos. He writes that the meaning is to be mafchid, to cause a fear, which means there's three ways of learning the pasuk. There's Rashi's way, the simple way. The Torah is saying that by taking this precaution, taking this measure, there will never be another Korach. You have the Medrash in Tanchuma. If people do fight on the Kehunah, they won't end up in the same abysmal mess that Korach fell into, literally. And then you have the Gemara in Sanhedrin that it's saying, no, there shall not be another person like Korach, a loisase. The Rambam says it definitely doesn't mean the third pshat. The first two, the Rambam believes is a simple meaning. The last one, not fighting, no, that's just a rabbinic thing. Look at the next page. The Ramban in number 9 says no. The Ramban in number 9 says, Aval HaKosuv ha'acher shetofas alav harav boy. The Ramban in his critique on the Rambam writes in number 9. The pasuk of lo yeh k'korach hadasai, right? The Omar, and the Rambam says that the Chacham explained, it's shlila. The pasuk is saying that what happened to Korach won't happen again. That Hashem told us if someone fights in the Kohanim, lo yikreu masher kar Korach, he won't be swallowed and burnt, but he'll get saras, etc. Says the Ramban, v'zeh vaday eina pshat dekra. The Rambam says that's the pshat. It's taka medrash tanchuma, but it's loy medrash ikri. It's a random. It's not even a mainstream medrash. It's a random medrash. You know, pshat hakosus, says the Ramban, v'ikroi, that Hashem was mitzvah b'rkui pachim by flattening the pans, coating the mizbeach, a zikaron to the Yidden for two things. Number one, a non-kohen shouldn't bring ketores and bring a carbon. And nobody should instigate and fight against and quarrel with Aaron's status as a kohen. These two things are a meniah, he says. Meniah means it's a loisas, you can't do it. The Ramban believes the pasuk is saying that you cannot be like Korach. It's a loisas. But specifically, you can't fight against the Kehunah. The Ramban believes, and that's it. We'll stop there. The Ramban says there is the simple meaning is God is saying there better not be another Korach. If someone fights, he will violate that. But only if you act like Korach, that you fight against the Kehunah. That and only that. If you fight against the Kehunah. So Ramban believes it's biblical, but only if you fight against the Kehunah.
He's arguing in Rashi too.
Yeah, according to Rashi, it's not a loisas at all. According to Rashi, the pshat in the pasuk, the Torah is saying, by the Yidden constantly seeing those smashed pans,
Discouraged.
they will be highly discouraged and frightened to ever fight, and b'meila there will never be like another Korach again. It's just telling you. Yeah. It's not giving instruction. According to Ramban, it is. You can't be like to fight on the Kehunah.
But this is a perfect example that shows that the Yidden are very slow at learning the lessons from the Eibishter. Because how many examples do they need not to do this, not to do this, but they do it anyway. Still.
Well, we're gonna see a loophole. We're gonna see a bit of a loophole maybe. Look in the smag. The smag number 10. Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol. Okay, we're getting to see some people over here. The Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol, Rab Moshe of Kusi in France, in the 1200s, one of the great Ashkenazi Rishonim of his time. He wrote a Sefer going through all 613 mitzvahs. Now, usually he follows the Rambam. Often you have the Rambam, the Sefer HaChinuch, and the Smag are almost always holding hands in how you count the 613. The Sefer HaChinuch was as Sephardi as the Rambam. The Smag was Ashkenazi, no doubt. But nonetheless, usually the three of them go together. If you look at the Rambam in the 613, does not count anywhere the lav of not holding Machloikes. Because you saw what he wrote to number 8 in his Sefer HaMitzvahs. He doesn't believe that's what the pasuk means. The Sefer HaChinuch as well. You open up a Sefer HaChinuch, you will not find any loisasa saying not to hold on to a Machlokes. Comes the Smag, and he says the following. He says, like he's talking about, there's a loisasa called loisashoik, not to hold on to someone else's money. There's a loisasa called loisigzol, not to steal. The simple difference is loisigzol means to walk over to someone and take his wallet, just to take it from by force. Loisashoik is if you have a property that belongs to someone, and you had it permissibly. You were given an item to watch. You hired someone to do a job. You owe them money, but you hold on to it. So says the Smag Afa Pisha Pshutoy Kachu that there are two different loisasas. Mikol Mokum Rava says in Bava Metzia Zeu Eshek Zeu Gezel. Rava says there's really no difference. Rava says anyone who does any of these actions violates both. Lahachi Afke Rachmana Betray Lishmi. If you hold on to someone else's money or you steal, it's all the same thing. There's really no difference if you take it or you hold on to it. There's no difference. Do you know why the Eibush should split it up? Lav or alav b'shnei lavin. If you do any act, you violate two lavin. So says the Smag lefi inyan zeh lav echad. According to that, you can't count it as two. You have certain things in the Torah mentioned many times. Don't cook a gdi b'chalev imay. Right? It's mentioned 3 times in the Torah. So, but it doesn't get counted as 3 different mitzvahs. It's one mitzvah. And if you do it, you could violate that one mitzvah 3 times. So Tovir says the Smag that according to Rava, whenever you hold someone's money or steal, you violate both. It's really one lav. You just get hit twice for it. So then we're down to 612. What's going to be number 613? V'nimne tachtov. You know what gets counted in its place? Whoever's machzik b'machloikes over belav. The Smag says you have to count that this is the one that pops up in place of that. So here the Smag deviates from the Rambam and the Sefer HaChinuch. And the Smag doesn't make any mention that he's deviating from the Rambam, but he does, he counts this. Now if you look in the Rambam counts Eshik and Gezel as 2 lavin. So does the Chinuch. Right? So therefore they don't have this room to count this. The Smag goes like Rava that it's counted as 1, and therefore there's room for number 613, it's this. And the Smag doesn't say like the Ramban, it's only if you fighting against the Kehunah. Any machzik Machlokes over belav. So we have the Smag who says this. We said the Baal Halachas Gedolos says it. The She'iltus we weren't sure, Rabbi Yosef Engel wasn't sure how to learn the She'iltus. The Rambam definitely disagrees. The Rambam holds all Machlokes is only rabbinic. It's only rabbinic. Not that the rabbis create all the Machlokes, but it's only rabbinic prohibition. All Machlokes is time rabbinic. That's it. And then you have the Ramban who had this middle opinion. It's biblical. The Ramban holds it's biblical if you're fighting against a Kohen. Look at number 11, the Smak. The Sefer Mitzvahs Katan. He's also from the 1200s. He's a few years younger than the Smag, the guy we just saw. The Smak is also an Ashkenaz. He's living in France. Rabbi Yitzchak of Courville. And look what he says. He starts off saying, "Shaloi la'arar ala kuna," not to challenge. Thank you. To challenge the Kehunah. D'chsiv, you can't be like Korach. But then he says, "B'chlal zeh shelo yeh bal Machloikes." Included in the law is b'chlal not to have Machlokes. And if you challenge the Kehunah, you will be tormented with saras like King Uzziah.
You think that challenging the Kehunah is a lav?
Yeah, he's definitely counting it as a lav, but he starts off saying, don't challenge the Kehunah, but then he says, b'chlal zeh, not to be a bal Machlokes at all. According to the Samak, it sounds like it's biblical as Doraisa, any Machlokes. You know, the heading of the mitzvah is, don't challenge the Kehunah, but a derivative, but biblical, a derivative is b'chlal not to have Machlokes.
Does that include all mitnagdim? Okay, you don't have to answer.
The Sheilta is brought before the prohibition not hating your brother in your heart. You know what the Gemara says about that? It doesn't apply to a Russia. The Gemara says if you see someone who violates Torah and mitzvahs, then you're allowed to hate them in your heart. All these things are off. So according to the Sheiltas, the only reason you can't have a Machlokes is so you shouldn't come to hate the guy. But you're allowed to hate someone who violates mitzvahs. You try and they willfully violate mitzvahs. So you definitely are allowed to have a Machlokes against them. The original Misnagdim, righteously felt that the Chassidim are going off the beaten path, and therefore this wouldn't apply. And they're allowed to have a Machlokes. Although, listen, the only reason you can't be machzik is because you shouldn't come to hate. But if you're allowed to hate such a person, then obviously you're allowed to have a. Which
mitzvah did they say that it was being violated?
Okay, so you know the well-known story. There was
the dance.
I'll tell you the story that when the Alter Rebbe was taken to jail, twice, he wasn't alone. Many of his chassidim were locked up as well, and Misnagdim in a certain far-off town heard that some of the Alter Rebbe's chassidim are being taken to a jail, and they're passing through their town. And these Misnagdim went to their Rav, and they asked him that some of these chassidim have been arrested. They're going to be led as political prisoners through town. We would like to make 2 rows surrounding the wagon and pelt them with stones. Now the Rav hadn't been too embroiled in the debate of Misnagdim and Chassidim. So he says, you're asking me for a heter to pelt them with stones. Why? So they say, what do you mean why? They're apikursim, they don't believe, they're heretics to them. So he said, really? They don't wear tefillin? They say, they wear 2 pairs of tefillin. They wear Rashi Rabbeinu Tam. So he said, what, they don't shech their animals? They say, well, you're kidding, they have special knives. They don't even trust our knives, they have their own knives. So the Rav says, what, they don't wear tzitzis? They say, are you kidding? They wear tzitzis down to their knees. Every mitzvah that he asked about, they said, they're more machmir than us. So he says, what? So how are they heretics? He didn't give them the okay. The day came, and this wagon shows up in town. Inside the wagon were 2 of the Alter Rebbe's greatest chassidim, Rabbi Isaac Homler and Rabbi Baruch Mordechai of Babroisk. And the Misnagdim were standing there with rocks in their hands, and they're waiting for the Rav to give them the thumbs up. The Rav came as well, and he's looking at the wagon, and he finally gets a peek, and he sees the Alter Rebbe Chassidim, venerable sages. Their faces were shining, brilliance and radiating, and the Rav was so taken aback. He screamed at all the people around, if anyone here deserved to be pelted with rocks, it's you guys. And they were so afraid, the whole town, they dropped their rocks and they ran. So, when it came to the crunch, the Chassidim were very careful in everything. But the rumors going around, listen, they said the Chassidim barely learn. They said Chassidim daven at strange hours. They're dancing all the time. They're singing. They don't respect Talmidei Chachamim. They smoke pipes and say this is the Ketores in the Beis HaMikdash. There were many issues that they had. Listen, we know they told the Vilna Gaon the Alter Rebbe sits with women on his lap because he had his 2-year-old granddaughter on his lap. They told the Vilna Gaon the Alter Rebbe eats on Tisha B'Av because that year Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbos. He said, fine. So, join me in number 12. Number 12 is from Reb Shloime ibn Gabiro. Reb Shloime ibn Gabiro was a major scholar in Spain in the 1000s, very early times. He was older than Rashi. He was in Spain, in southern Spain, and he was taken care of by Reb Shmuel HaNagid. Reb Shmuel HaNagid was an extremely wealthy Jew. He was a general of the army, of the Pasha over there. He was the Rav, he was the rabbi, he funded everything. An incredible person. And if Shmuel HaNagid wanted to turn Spain into a center of Torah learning. And so he got in contact with people. He said, come here, I'll pay for everything. And he brought this Reb Shloime ibn Gabir, who was a young man, a brilliant mind, who was a poet and a philosopher. And Shmuel HaNagid said, come, I'll take care of you. So Shloime ibn Gabirol had incredible success at a young age, beautiful poems and a philosopher like we mentioned. Unfortunately, he was killed. Some believe he was still in his 20s. He was murdered by an Arab on the street who was jealous of him. The Arab killed him, buried him in his backyard. The Arab buried him and right next to a fruit tree that the Arab had. The following season, this Arab's, his fruit tree blossomed and gave off fruit before anybody else. Rumors spread, people were saying the guy's a wizard, he's a witch, and magic. Anyhow, the police came and wanted to inspect what's going on. They dug, they found the dead body. And this Arab got his just desserts. But unfortunately, Shlomo Gabriel he was taken young, but he has a sefer where it's like a poem going through all the mitzvahs. And in this stanza of the poem, he says like this: "V'lo ya'abet oirach, don't thwart your path. V'yil otoirach, and you're just going to be a headache. V'lo yikaker, don't be like Korach, v'rei of Hamamrim and his friends, the rebellious." Right? The Torah says, "Don't be like Korach and his Eidah. Don't be like Korach and Rei of Hamamrim." So Shloime ibn Gabirol seems to say very clearly, it's one of his counting is one of the 613. So he counts it. Who else? Look at number 13. This is the Yereim. Rabbi Eliezer Mimitz, one of the great Ashkenazi Rishonim. In the early days of the Baalei Tosfos, he lives in Metz. Today they pronounce. I was once to the Shir somewhere. I pronounced the city as Metz. Someone was there from France. He starts laughing. You know Metz? Mess, kind of mess. It's not Metz. It's mess. Today they say it is mess. But in Sfarim, it's always written with a tzaddik. So Rabbi Eliezer of Mitz. The Shagas Aryeh was a Rav in the same city, 500 years later. But the Yereim, he's called Rabbi Eliezer Mimitz. He's called the Re'aim, Reish Aleph Mem. His sefer is called the Yereim. You can't be like Korach. Look what he says, unbelievable. Hashem commanded, Shelo ya'arer adam ala Kehunah, a person cannot challenge Kehunah. Lo yomer adam, a person shouldn't say, Lama yavid kohen v'ani lo yavid. Why? Not fair. Why does the kohen get to serve and I don't? Why? It's not fair. It's not fair. V'chein lo ya'arer al kol adam v'adam shenitim lo kavod b'mitzvahs hayotzer. You can't challenge someone that was given a cover to do a mitzvah. The chsiv of Parshas Korach, there should never be a Korach Keidasai, because he was ma'ar on Moshe and Aaron, and it said Madua Tisnas al Kal Hashem. From the Yereim, it sounds like it's biblical to challenge Kehunah or anyone that gets a position to do a mitzvah. If someone's about Tokeya, and you want to challenge him, why does he have a chazakah? Now, how does he know both of them? I think he learns because Korach and his Eidah challenged Moshe and Aaron. Aaron was the Kohen Gadol. Moshe taught Torah. So you see from there that if you challenge either of those positions, because look at number 14 is a commentary called Toyafos Re'em, written by a guy, Avram Abba of Minsk. Okay? Before the days of, so before the war. And he writes, B'mitzvahs HaYotzer, he wants to say like this, Davke, according to the Araim, you can't challenge Kehunah or any covet given to a person, B'mitzvahs Hashem. This is what the Pasuk means. But the Gemara in Sanhedrin that says you can't have your Machzik B'Machloikes, that's Asmachta. And he says, Kei Nira Das Rabbeinu Ha'im. This is what it appears the Uraim holds. V'chein Kosav Ramban. The Ramban writes in Sefer HaMitzvahs we saw. And V'chein Kosav Vovei Ha'amudim. Vovei Ha'amudim, his name was Yitzchak Tayyab. He was a rabbi in Tunisia. 200 years ago or so. And so what's the Toifus Re'em saying? He wants to put the Uraim with the Ramban. I think it's a bit different. The Ramban says you're only over the loisase if you fight against the Kehunah. You want to take the Kehunah. Any other Machloikes is rabbinic. The Uraim says no. He stretches it to anyone that's in a position of a mitzvah and you want to challenge. A guy is a chazan, a guy's about to kei, a guy's a rav, a guy's on a bezim one. A shliach. And I think the raya is, like he seems to say, it's because Korach and Adosset challenged Moshe and Aaron. So Moshe wasn't a kohen; he was a leader, a nasi, a melech. So what we have over here is you have like this. To put it in a nutshell, you have those who believe it's rabbinic. The Rambam holds the whole thing of having a Machlokes is rabbinic. Most people we saw hold that something is doiraisa. The She'iltus, we weren't sure of. Yosef Engel had his question. We said the Bahag, though, who's kind of the same time of the She'iltus, holds its doiraisa. The Ramban holds its doiraisa if you fight against the Kehunah. The Yereim hold its doiraisa against the Kehunah or against anyone that has a position of a mitzvah. But anything else would be rabbinic. The Samag seems to say any Machlokes is biblical. The Samak, we saw in number 11, says the heading of the mitzvahs don't challenge Kehunah. But the derivative is any Machlokes. And also Shlomo ibn Gabirol, who was before most of the people we mentioned, seems to say it's any Machlokes. I will tell you there's a very important commentary on Reb Shlomo ibn Gabirol's Sefer, written by the Rashpatz, who was a Rav about 600 years ago, passed away, called Zoyer Horakia, the light of the sky, beautiful sefer. He believes that Reb Shlomo ibn Gabirol holds like the Ramban. You only violate if you like Korach that you fight against the Kehunah. But okay, if you remember though, Rabbeinu Yonason of Lunel and the Knesset HaGedolah believe that had Moshe not made peace, he would have violated the law. But what was Moshe?
That's a stretch.
Yeah. But not just that. Even if Moshe would have been considered part of the Machlokes, he wasn't arguing on the Kehunah. So, the Ramban and all those that believe it's dafka on the Kehunah, could that fit at all? So you could say maybe that, if Dasan and Aviram were also fighting against the Kehunah, and Moshe is considered part of their Machlokes, even though he's not fighting against the Kehunah, but because he gets blamed, or both parties get blamed, you are perpetuating a Machlokes which is against the Kehunah. So even though what?
They were fighting against the Kehunah.
Dasan v'Aviram, it's a big shaila of Dasan v'Aviram, Moshe.
Why is Moshe?
They challenged Moshe. They weren't so upset with Aaron. They were upset with Moshe.
No, they were not so upset with Aaron, but they were
had a vendetta against Moshe.
Who are you to
be Melech?
No, I mean to appoint Aaron as
no, but Dasan v'Aviram didn't bring Keturah like the 250 people. They weren't interested in that. They didn't want to be a Kohen. They were against Moshe. They were happy to fight against Moshe. They jumped on the Machlokes against Aaron, but they didn't really have an issue with that. They had an issue. Moshe, Dasan v'Aviram, they suffered in Mitzrayim with all the other Jews. They were part of those shoitrim that chose to get whipped instead of having the Jews underneath them suffer for the lack of the tally of bricks that had to be coughed up every day. And Moshe wasn't there for any of that. Moshe was busy in Kush and in Midian. And Moshe comes back and says, here, I'm the Redeemer. You weren't here. You didn't suffer like us. Now you want to take it. They had a personal advantage. Aaron was in Mitzrayim with them. They liked Aaron. It was Moshe they had a problem with. So I'm saying a stretch. If their fight was against Aaron, and Moshe was embroiled into the fight, and you're going to say that both parties are equally responsible, then maybe you could say that Moshe was considered involved in a Machloikes against the Kehunah, and he would have violated the loisas. It's a major stretch.
So then would you say that when the Eibishter tells Moshe, that's it, I'm done, they're done, and he goes ahead and does it anyway, is that because he felt that there was a certain guilt, obligation to them, or, I mean, why? If you accept, God is saying, so now you're going against what God is telling you?
So we had a long shir a couple of years ago that Korach, they all felt that Moshe was told by God to appoint Aaron, but they felt it's because Moshe wanted it. Ritzayin Yerev Yas, Hashem does the will of those that fear Him. They felt Hashem did tell Moshe, but that's because Moshe had a personal desire, so Hashem went along with it. They felt that Moshe was kind of pulling God's hand along with him. It was a deep-rooted philosophical issue they had. There is a letter of the Divrei Malkiel. So let's just finish up over here. If it's biblical holding a debate, there's really no way to get it. Holding a Machlokes, there's no real way to get around it. If it's rabbinic, we know already when it comes to rabbinic prohibitions, when there's kavod abrius at stake, if someone's honor is at stake, you violated the Derabanan. So if holding a Machlokes is only rabbinic, there may be room, if someone's honor is at stake, to hold the Machlokes. We saw a Tosfos once in Masechta Shabbos who holds that embarrassment is considered acute pain. And we also have a rule that often in a case of pain, you can violate a Derabanan. I would say also if it's Derabanan, you could do it through a guy. You get a guy to stir the Machloikes. But if it's biblical, it's hard to get around. If it's rabbinic, no, seriously, there are times when Rabbanans are pushed away for kavod habrius, the personal honor, in a place of pain, in a place of embarrassment. The Divrei Malkiel, Malkiel Tzvi Tenenbaum, about 150 years ago or so, was dealing with a case. You have a rabbi in the city, right? A new guy comes in. He wants to usurp the authority. He wants to be the new Rav in town, without the reshus of the pre-existing Rav. The new guy comes in. And you have lots of people supporting the new guy. So the Divrei Malkiel says not only the new Rav violates creating Machlokes, but all those that support him. Because he says, why does the Pasuk say there shouldn't be like Korach and like his Eidah? He says there's a difference between the two. Korach was the guy in charge. The Eidah, they were the supporters. Without supporters, the Machlokes would never continue. The supporters are equally responsible as the figurehead. And therefore he says that although they're supporting the new rabbi, are just as guilty. The Eidah is just as guilty as Korach. You can't be Korach, you can't be the Eidah either. That's what he said. He came out very sharp. I will tell you, the Netziv will end with this. The Netziv has a letter in his sefer called Meishiv Dover, the Netziv of Volozhin. And he says, you know what the difference of Korach and the Eidah is? Korach is the leader. The Eidah are all his chassidim. The Eidah really believe that they're doing the right thing. It's often the figurehead himself, he knows the truth. He knows the truth. And but those that follow him really mean it with the emes. They really think that their leader's the right guy. Sometimes you have the other way. That the leader really thinks he's the right guy, right? The Eidah knows he's not, but they're happy to use him as a... But often it's the first way. That the Eidah Nebuch are going, they really think that this guy is ready, is fitting to be king, a leader. It's only the figurehead himself that knows in his heart of hearts he's not ready. And yet the Torah says there's a violation for both. You can't be like Korach, you can't be like his Eidah. Very powerful idea. The Eibishter will help him. that the Talmidei Chacham should be marbim shalom ba'olam, not that the Balabatim hold hands to fight against the Rav, but hold hands together with the Rav, including our Rav over here, as Ozain Gesund. He should have a speedy refuah shlema, and he should be back here in Mitzvah to join us with future shiurim.
Amen.